Hello, and welcome to the Red Flags Podcast.
The first podcast that takes love, sex, and relationship questions from Reddit and attempts to provide helpful advice based on the experience of two strangers on the internet.
I'm Greg Feeney.
And I'm Deb Gould. And we are those strangers.
All right, so welcome everybody back to the podcast. How you doing today, Deb?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Just got back from a trip to the mountains, so I feel like my soul is cleansed.
Ooh, I'm on the opposite end of that. My soul is still crushed, but I am leaving for a trip tomorrow. So
yeah, so you're gonna cleanse it.
Yes, yeah. So
That's
next
good.
week we'll both be in a good spot.
Oh gosh, we're gonna be like, we should have tried to time it so that we could both come back and been super relaxed. Although maybe that wouldn't work. Maybe the podcast would be like really sleepy and kind of dull because we'd just be like in post-vacation mode or something. But
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like next week.
yeah, okay.
So I shared an Instagram post with you this week from an account I follow. The account is for Dr. Eric Sprankle, and he's an associate professor of clinical psychology, and he's authoring a book that's going to be called The Wonderfully Weird History and Science of Masturbation, which I'm really excited about. Anyway, regardless, the post said this. It said, I have to take a deep dive into the nofap and semen retention subreddits for a chapter I'm working on for my book. May Satan watch over me during these trying times. So I sent that to you. One, it said Reddit. But two, I had no idea what any of this meant.
Yeah. First of all, I love that this guy's name is Dr. Sprankle. That's such a cool name.
It's such a good name.
Especially for like a serious, doctor man who's writing a book.
Yeah.
But, he's writing about masturbation, so that's pretty awesome. I feel like the name is fitting. Yeah, so this nofap thing, I think it was born on Reddit. It has since, I think, moved on to other parts of the internet. But if I'm not mistaken, it's probably about 10 years old or so.
And I'll say my partner was surprised that I had never even heard the term FAP as slang for masturbation. Like, that was not even in my brain.
Again, I think that's probably a Reddit thing. I think that probably came from Reddit. For anyone that can't make the connection, the FAP is supposed to be like an onomatopoeia, like sort of like the noise of masturbating.
Classy.
Yeah, and obviously this is more of a male-focused community.
Yes.
I think I've read between 95 to 99% of the community is male. Yeah, from what I know about it, started on Reddit probably about 10 years ago, and then it grew so large that they went off and started their own forum, but I think Reddit's probably still where they're mostly associated with. And it seems like the whole thing started because these studies came out, and I believe they were Chinese studies, that showed that men who abstained from masturbating had increased testosterone. And I think that's kind of where this whole thing started, and then people ran with it. Now there's all sorts of claims that these people in this community have. They say that it increases things like renewed energy, greater focus, concentration, better sleep, and they also perceive masturbation as unhealthy. But it seems that most of this is just supported by pseudoscience. There's very little evidence to really support any of their claims. A lot of their beliefs cite the work of a guy named Gary Wilson, who's an anti-pornography activist. He has no medical or scientific training, and he often seems to be like dabbling in pseudoscience.
So the piece that's really hard for me is that in my, shallow dive into any of this was the idea that maybe it's not fully anti-masturbation or anti-sex, but like the no-fap for some people is like you can still do those things, but you can't ejaculate.
Yeah, then you're getting into even weirder territory, I think, because there's also, there's some cultural beliefs that exist in certain areas. Like I think, again, maybe in some parts of Chinese society, China's so big and varied that it's kind of hard to label it as like, this is what they do in China. Like it's probably just a very specific group of people that, there's even like spiritual beliefs that your sperm is sacred and that you don't want to give it away. And, I've read posts about like guys saying like after you ejaculate inside of a woman, you need to like eat it back so that it like reabsorbs your energy or something like that. So there's definitely, there's so many, I guess there's so many vectors where people come at this. God, pardon my come at this. Anyways. But yeah, it's odd. And I think the weirdest thing for me is that it's also sort of wrapped up in a lot of these groups that have gotten really big. A lot of these like misogynist groups such as incels and MGTOW. And, you know, I think that the consensus is if you go on a lot of these forums and you read what these people are saying, they share a lot of beliefs with, do you know what red pill is?
No.
So red pill is another, see, these are all just like, we're basically right now, we're just checking off all the toxic things on Reddit.
Right.
You know, the red pill movement is like this, is sort of like the pickup artist movement, which maybe you've heard of, which is basically like guys that they treat dating and sex as like a game that they have to try to win. You know, it's like, it's not men and women are people and have their own needs and wants. It's like women have the power and the pussy and men need to like utilize their strategies to get it and win it.
So I don't want to go too much deeper into this world right now, but it's really interesting to know it exists. Some of the favorite things that I found was that folks that like are part of this community call themselves fapstronauts.
Yeah, that's
just really adorable.
And a couple of things that I want to note to kind of like further contextualize these people is that, and I hate, sorry, these people. Look, these are people too. But on their website, it notes there's like legal warnings that scientists are prohibited from conducting research on these people.
Right.
And they basically like actively oppose science. So it's like, it's very cultish, which seems to be sort of how things are these days when it comes to groups like this. They don't seem to really be interested in open dialogue. They've sort of picked their thing and they're honing in on it. And a lot of these groups, I guess, when they trace back funding and stuff, a lot of the funding is coming from right-wing groups and Christian groups, anti-pornography groups, anti-masturbation groups. So, you know, just the people that are trying to steal all your freedoms.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I read that was kind of helpful is it's really hard, like you said, it's really hard to find science and like anything that actually speaks to a professional or medical professional about these topics. But something that was helpful to me was this idea that like any of your sperm that reaches their sell-by date and aren't used are just recycled in the body, right? Like your body just absorbs them. So just by keeping it, like you don't get to keep it. Like there's no storage facility that is endless.
Yeah, and even with just like a quick scan of studies that are out there, I saw that there's plenty of studies that suggest that masturbating and having sex actually ups your testosterone, which makes sense because it's like feedback, you know, it's like when you work a muscle, it gets stronger type of thing. You know, I would think that would, to me, that would make sense. That's generally how the body works. When you do something more, it's going to, you know, kind of build up. So I don't think there's really a lot of evidence to support this. And yeah, I will say this, that sometimes with things like this, they start on something that makes a lot of sense, which is that porn addiction is not great and masturbating addiction's not great either, right? And there are a lot of problematic things about pornography. And if you wanted to talk about pornography and say, hey, it's probably not a great idea to masturbate to pornography 3 times a day, every day. And there's probably various reasons why, you know, it could desensitize you. It could create that when you're with a real person, you are unable to sort of, you know, you're probably not able to get that like a super hardcore porn that you've now come to crave because you've delved so far into it, you know?
Right.
So, you know, they're starting from a point that can seem reasonable and then they just go off the deep end. So, you know, I think for me, moderation is always the key. You know, obviously I support pornography and masturbation, but there's definitely problems that exist around these things. And yeah, we should still talk about these things and try to come up with solutions.
So you want to jump into our first topic?
Yeah, let's do that.
Our first topic comes from r/relationships. This comes from someone who's a 23-year-old female. And it says, my boyfriend, 24-year-old male, feels he's entitled to part of my tax refund because his wasn't as good. I already can't deal with this one. Okay. My boyfriend and I have been living together for almost 2 years, and we have things split a certain way due to our jobs and when the others get paid. I pay for groceries and the internet and ship into the other utilities as I can. My boyfriend usually covers the rent and protests if I try to give him a fair portion of it. Anything upwards of $300 he won't take, but I give him what I can. Money is definitely a stress in our relationship. From him specifically, whenever it's time to pay bills, he gets really angry and upset, and it's put a bit of strain on us. Anytime I spend money on anything else besides bills, I feel guilty. However, my boyfriend spends most of his money on food. He buys breakfast and lunch at his job, where he isn't discounted at all for it. He says he wants to make his own lunch again like he used to, but he doesn't. Anyway, we got our tax returns last week. Mine was $1,800, and his was maybe $600. Ever since getting my return, he's been mentioning, we need new tires for the car. We need these $100 windshield wipers. Let's go out to this hibachi place. And I told him that I'd really like to save the money I got, so I'm not reaching the negatives every week like I was before the return. He says that it isn't fair my return was so much better than his, and since I only chip in on a few of the bills, that he should be able to do some extra things since we have extra money. I know as a couple you have a joint account and all, but we don't need to spend a ton of money. The tires I can handle, because it's a need, but everything else isn't as necessary. I'm a little lost at what I can say to my boyfriend without coming off as accusatory, since beyond food, I have no idea where his money goes. TLDR, boyfriend wants to do everything and anything now that I got my tax return and it was better than his.
Okay, so this idea that the tax refund is like bonus money or lucky or there's like some fairness involved here is really silly because it's just literally money that she already earned and that she overpaid to the IRS.
Right.
So
it's not the lottery.
Yeah, it's not like she came across some windfall or got left a ton of money by like a relative. This is her money. This is no different than the money that she normally gets in her paycheck.
Right. And I'm struggling because it's clear that these folks are not talking about what the whole money picture looks like, right?
Yeah. She seems to have a decent understanding of finances. She doesn't really mention about the earning numbers here, which I'm curious because I'm wondering why the boyfriend's not accepting a half of the rent or something like that. Like, was it his place and she moved in?
Yeah, we don't know what a fair portion, like that definition could look very different to different people.
Yeah, I mean, she said anything upwards of $300 he won't take. Well, most rent in the U.S. right now is going to be 3 or 4 times that. So
right.
I don't know if this is like a chivalrous thing on his part, like he feels like he's the man, so he's got to pay for more, or if it's like, maybe she doesn't make as much money as he does. So it's really hard to tell where he's coming from. I guess maybe it's making him think about that he pays a lot more than she does or something like that. And he's becoming like sort of resentful. But honestly, that would be a conversation to have where you circle back and talk about your finances in general and not put it all on this tax return.
Yeah. I know that finances cause a huge amount of stress on a lot of people in relationships, right? And from the way she describes it, she says whenever it's time to pay bills, he gets really angry. So I do wonder, part of finances is deciding who actually pays the bills actively, right? Like, where's that money coming from? Are you sitting down together and doing bills? Is someone responsible for the bills and then someone else just gives them the money? I don't know. What are your thoughts on how this should look for a couple?
I mean, I think that a lot of different arrangements can work out just depending on the people. Like I can say in my marriage, I pay all the bills. I just basically, my wife just sends me money. I pay the bills. And I can relate to stressing around bills. I mean, it definitely is a little bit stressful. And I feel like it's a reality for a lot of people that we're living paycheck to paycheck. That's kind of a very common thing these days. And, when I when I sit down to pay bills, I think my wife knows like not to talk to me while I'm paying bills because I'm probably not going to be like my best self in that moment, you know? Because you're basically just like watching all your money go away in like the 15 minutes that you're, and, you know, and when you're done, your bank account is never as good as you want it to be.
Yeah.
So I can understand being stressed. I do think that he has a responsibility to try to contain that, focus it into the, you know, in the moment and then let it go when it's over. You know, that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, okay, I'm paying bills. Don't talk to me because I'm going to be grumpy. But as soon as this is over, I'll like go outside for a walk and come back and then we'll just resume our lives, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's also like figuring out a way to talk about all the little pieces, right? There's deciding who pays the bulk of the bills and how that works. But also, she mentions this idea of her husband going out for meals and she feels like it's wasteful, right? That's clear in what she's saying here. So where can you have control, right? If you're both planning to save money or if you're both planning to spend money, like when do you have freedom and when do you have accountability? How's that work?
Yeah, that's really difficult. Well, first of all, you said husband. It's actually just her boyfriend.
Oh, right.
They've been living together for 2 years, and she talks about. She says, I think the reason why you might have thought husband was because she mentions that you, as a couple, you have a joint account.
Yeah, I've never had a joint account.
Okay, I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, first of all, having a joint account in a boyfriend-girlfriend scenario just to me sounds insane. Like, that's just probably always a bad idea. And I'm not even so sure that it's a great idea for married couples to have a joint account. I think it depends on the couple. Me and my wife, do we have a joint account? I guess not. No, we don't. We don't have a joint account.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Something that's always worked best for me is if you're going to have a joint account, that you also have individual accounts.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people suggest that you each have your personal account and then you have a joint account because it just makes it easier, I guess, to, I don't know, focus on what the things that you're spending together. Yeah. But then, like you said, where do you draw the line? Because if you notice that your partner is spending a lot of money, right? Well, let's say they have their own account, so you don't know, exactly what's going on there. You don't know if they're running up debt or if they're like riding it on zero all the time. So I think that like with his meals, and meals are a big, big thing. If you go out to eat a lot, you tend to spend a ton of money. And it's the kind of money where it adds up so fast, but you don't really even notice it. So it could be something worth addressing with him, I guess.
Yeah, that and the idea of savings. Like if they have a joint account and they're talking about joint spending, maybe they need to talk about joint saving, if that's possible.
Yeah, and unfortunately the reality is that, this is a 23 and 24-year-old.
Yeah. And
I think we just know that the majority of people at this age are just not going to be able to save money. It's just, unfortunately, that's just, that's the world we're living in. But they definitely should try if they can, and if they have to cut out eating out and stuff like that. I mean, that's definitely one of the first things that they could look at. So
yeah, and so at the end, her ask is, "I'm lost as to what I can say to my boyfriend without coming off as accusatory," and that is really hard for people, right? How do you open this conversation in a way that's kind and will be productive? What could she say to you, Greg?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough. I just think that it has to come down to they need to have a conversation fundamentally about, what they earn, what their expenses are, how much is just personal money that should be spent how you see fit. Because if they're going to get in fights about it, then that just goes to show that they need to have these conversations. Like, I guess, if they both had a ton of money, then maybe these conversations don't matter, because they can both just spend a lot of money and not care. But once it starts affecting the relationship or it starts affecting things that are, co-owned or co-paid for, like she did mention the car. It sounds like they have a car together. Yeah. And, I think it's one of those tough areas because it's like she probably should offer maybe, to pay a little bit extra for the new tires, just because she has the money. But, she's certainly not obligated to. I mean,
absolutely.
But I think it's one of those things where it's like she could offer, but him asking is a little tacky,
Yeah. I think that's just something that people forget to talk about when they first get in a relationship, and it's always suggested by relationship experts around like your feelings about money. Like, for example, like in my relationship, I am super stressed about money. Like, I come from somewhat of a scarcity mindset, whereas my partner doesn't. They're just like, yeah, it's just money, right? I'll never get there. So we had to figure out a system that would work, that would minimize my stress so we could be on the same level. And so we're super dorks about it. Like, we have a spreadsheet that has like formulas in the cells that basically just, if we put the information in, it will tell us what we need to pay.
All right, so this next topic comes from r/sex. Had my first threesome last night with girlfriend. Need advice ASAP. I had my first threesome with my girlfriend and a friend last night. We were all drinking and having a good time. I got a little too drunk, and so after things started to get going, I couldn't get hard. A threesome turned into me watching my girlfriend fuck my friend for the next hour. Lost all interest in what was happening while they were having sex, but I said nothing. Now today I'm having distant and hurt feelings towards the whole thing. I need some advice about how to deal with this. My girlfriend and friend were respectful throughout the whole thing and checked in on me often. It's my own fault for not speaking up. Need advice to deal with these feelings ASAP.
I mean, the first thing I will say is that I do appreciate that he's willing to take some ownership over this whole thing, right? That shows a little bit of self-awareness that this would have looked very different and if he was able to get an erection.
Yeah, I think it would have been different if he was able to get an erection. I also think he recognizes, it seems, that they would have been considerate to his feelings if he had spoken up. And instead, he basically just kind of kept confirming that everything was okay when clearly it wasn't. So he's at least acknowledging that perhaps they didn't do anything wrong, and that if he had communicated things differently, they would have actually, done something for him or stopped or whatever.
Yeah. The hard thing is now for him to be able to actually deal with his feelings, he might not be able to do that alone, right?
Yeah. Well, so losing erections, I think, is really common in threesomes because there's just a lot going on mentally there, which creates anxiety about performance or just about being in a new scenario. I think that in general, people think like, oh, this is just going to be so hot and it's going to be amazing. But it's, you're navigating something new.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of one of those areas where penises can tend to stop working when there's just too much mental stuff happening.
Especially if you drank too much. And that's another challenge altogether.
I will say this. I've read a lot of threesome horror stories, and almost all of them include over drinking.
Well, yeah, because you feel like you need the courage to like do this thing, especially if you've never done it before. But yeah, don't.
Yeah, I think having a drink to like loosen up is probably fine.
Yeah.
But once you're drinking enough to become drunk, I think that's probably a bad idea.
And maybe if you have to drink enough to become drunk in order to have the threesome, you probably shouldn't be having the threesome.
Yeah, right. There might be some other areas where you need to do some work, maybe if it's confidence, or maybe you're just not really that into it,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about how these types of relationships or situationships are like next level.
Yeah, you gotta be, your communication has to be spot on. I think you have to have done a lot of work on yourself, or else this kind of stuff can get really messy. And to speak to the scenario that he was in, I think that during a threesome, you probably have to accept that sometimes it's going to become like a bit of a twosome at points, right? And you need to be able to either sort of like sit back and enjoy that part and just be like, oh, wow, this is cool. I can watch,
Yeah.
And you also need to have the confidence to either like reinsert yourself back in or communicate to the other people that, hey, I'm like feeling a little left out. Can we maybe like bring me back in? Because it seems like if, he says they were respectful and that he seems to not really blame them and think that they did anything wrong. So yeah, that's something that it seems like a confidence thing that he could have going into it.
Greg, what are your thoughts on the idea of having your first threesome with your girlfriend and a friend instead of your girlfriend and like kind of a stranger?
Yeah, so I think involving friends in your sex life is probably a bad idea. I think there's some exceptions,
Yeah.
but it's probably a bad idea. There's a saying that swingers always say, and it's that you should make friends with swingers and not try to make swingers out of friends. And I think the reason they say that is because
I don't talk to a lot of swingers, so I love this swinger lore.
I'm not really friends with any swingers personally, but I've just been exposed to it online and read things through like media and stuff. And I think that, and also on these Reddits, it gets brought up. And I think that the point is that it's a messy to try to enter into these kind of relationships with friends, because now you've already got a relationship that can like be complicated or can get messed up. So yeah, no, I totally agree. I think if you're going to do threesomes with your friends, then you need to like tread very lightly and be very selective about who you do it with.
So dealing with the feelings part, because that's really what they're looking for, right? Ugh. I think you are going to have to bring this up potentially with a minimum your partner, right? He's going to have to let his girlfriend know about the feelings he's feeling, even if it's for like a short amount of time. It's unfortunate because it might make that person feel guilty a little bit, but they didn't know anything, right?
Yeah, and I sort of trust him to word this appropriately based on the way he's already written his post,
Yeah.
Like I'm getting some good vibes off this dude as far
absolutely.
as like how he'll approach the scenario. I don't think he's going to be, calling her a whore or like or
Right.
doing any of this crazy stuff that I've seen in these same scenarios. I've seen a lot of posts like this where the same thing happens and the other person's very angry at their partner, and it doesn't really seem that that's what this guy's feeling. And so, yeah, I think she does need to be involved, and probably his friend, and he can just simply state how he felt. He can go ahead and say, "Look, I'm not pointing the finger. I think I made some mistakes. I should have communicated better." And I think maybe if they all talk about it, it'll make him feel better.
Yeah, and so often the answer to some of these is communication, right? It's better communication, any communication. I think that a good way to approach this, if you are entering into like your first experience with something like a threesome, is to even have a communication plan. That sounds really dorky and not sexy at all. But like saying like, hey, after this, like, let's meet up and like have a debrief. Like, we'll just have coffee. And maybe the goal is to say, are we ever going to do this again? Right? To say like, no, that was a one-time thing. Thanks for your participation. Or to say, yeah, that was great. Like, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think that it's common that when weird things happen in open or monogamous relationships, there can be like a period of like, okay, let's close the relationship for a little bit and like sort of like recalibrate our one-on-one connection. And then once we start to feel comfortable again, or it can be in this case, he starts to feel comfortable again, they could explore. And I totally agree with you. I think communication is totally sexy. And
I love that.
but yeah, I know it can feel a little nerdy, but
absolutely.
Ultimately,
yeah, if you haven't done it before, right? I think it takes practice.
Yes, for sure.
Something we don't know about this before we wrap this one up is actually, in looking at it more, it's not clear if they had planned to have this threesome or if they just started drinking and it happened.
Yeah, and again, I would say that would be another bad idea. I think these are the kind of things that you want to have a conversation way ahead of time.
Yeah.
And you sort of should have a plan, and you should have a backup plan, and you should have clear boundaries. Like, there could be a boundary that says, look, if you notice that I'm like withdrawn and not participating,
right,
I would appreciate it if I didn't have to ask you to stop.
Right.
Which I mean, look, you could just say use your big boy words and just say, "Hey, I'm feeling a little." But if you communicate it beforehand, that could be something.
Yeah.
And I think that that's another thing that's important for her in this scenario is that if you see something going on with your partner, it's probably a good idea to pull back a little bit. But it sounds like maybe she did. He doesn't really like get too specific. He just says that. They were respectful and checked in on him often. So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like she maybe even did that. So perhaps she's fine there.
Yeah. He might have just felt weird telling them to stop. And I get that. Okay, this next one comes from r/relationship advice. My boyfriend, 28-year-old male, doesn't want me, 24-year-old female, to have a dog. I've been dating this guy for just over a month, and up until now, things have been really amazing. But the other day, we were taking his dog out for a walk when he casually mentioned that he wouldn't date someone who had a dog of their own. I'm about to graduate college, and I've spent the last 5+ years waiting until I wasn't in school to adopt a dog. So hearing this was sort of conflicting. I decided to bring it up to him again today, sharing that I've been waiting for years to adopt a dog, and wondering how hard and fast this rule was. He ended up fully doubling down on it, saying he had no interest in the stress it could potentially cause him. He has a dog of his own, and I initiated the conversation when he brought up wanting a second dog. Let me reread that for everyone. He has a dog of his own, and I initiated the conversation when he brought up wanting a second dog. Okay, calling his stance a boundary. We then had a short conversation disagreeing about what can be considered a boundary, and I asked him if he would break up with me if I decided to adopt a dog, to which he said, probably. And after a few moments of tense silence, we ended the conversation. I don't like the idea of another person dictating what I can or can't do with my life, especially someone who has been a part of it only very recently. I also don't like the idea of ending an otherwise great relationship over something so hypothetical/distant. I'm also feeling like this is an indication that his feelings for me are more dependent upon my convenience to his life than anything I bring to the table as a partner, the dog being a deal breaker because it would hypothetically threaten that convenience. But I'm not sure if I'm just reading too far into it. Is this any kind of red or yellow flag?
Okay, so I'm going to start off by nitpicking something that she said, just because I think primarily we're going to talk about this dude and his thing. But I'll start with what she said. She said that she was having a disagreement with him about what can be considered a boundary. And I'm like, that's not a thing. Anything can be a boundary. Like, you can it's okay to have any boundary you want, but that doesn't mean that other people are going to be like, yeah, I'll stick around for that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, if you come up with some crazy boundary, then you just won't, your options will be limited. Okay. Right. So I don't know why she's trying to like argue him out of having a boundary. You know, she's like saying like, this isn't really a boundary. And it's like, well, that's kind of I think that's a bad angle to approach.
I was trying to figure out too, like, where was she coming from there? And the only thing I could think of was maybe she's saying that like a boundary is something about yourself, right? Like, I don't like when people touch me there, or I don't like this, instead of like, I don't like when someone else gets a dog. Like, I wonder if it was because she's like, the boundary is not his. The boundary is saying, I don't like what another person does. But like a very clear boundary we've talked about before is the idea of like saying, well, I wouldn't date anyone who has kids, or I wouldn't date anyone who has this.
Right.
It's still a boundary.
And this question, this whole scenario is basically this. It's very similar to, I met this guy, he has a kid, I want a kid, and he's like, I don't want any more kids.
But then he says he wants a second kid.
Well, why? He didn't say he wanted another dog, did he?
So the weird part, and it's the part I read twice.
Okay.
I read it twice for a reason, because I was like, what? It says, he has a dog of his own, and I initiated the conversation when he brought up wanting a second dog. Okay,
so I interpreted this differently. When he brought up wanting a second dog. I think what she's trying to say is that when he brought up the possibility of having a second dog, like, I don't think he wanted it.
And I read it like,
see where that's
he wants 2 dogs, she can't have a dog.
Oh, see, that would be real messed up. I mean, just based on everything else in the post, it seems like he just doesn't want another dog.
Either way, these folks have been dating for just over a month. They don't live together. I'm like, run, girl, run. Honestly, like, I think this is a yellow flag, because he's trying to dictate something that she's going to do and take responsibility for. They don't even live together. Is it going to maybe make it harder for them to go on a trip? Yeah, they got to pay 2 kennel fees, whatever that looks like. But like, this feels super unreasonable, and his inflexibility would make me want to get the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand maybe not wanting a dog if you don't have a dog. That is a big leap. Going from no dog to dog. You know, dogs are such an integral part of people's lives and part of their identities. And if that's just not your thing, I mean, I can understand being like, yeah, look, I'm just not someone that really wants to, you know. But then again, they've been dating a month, so at that point, if I was in this guy's shoes,
yeah,
I'm not really a person that wants a dog, so I might voice that, say, yeah, I'm just not really interested in having a dog. But if the person I'm dating up for a month talks about getting a dog, that's just like way too early to be like, well, then we're not compatible. I don't know.
Right.
It's like, it just seems a little weird.
Yeah.
Especially considering,
weird.
Yeah. Because considering he has a dog, it even seems even shittier.
That's the piece. It's like, I can have a dog, but you can't have a dog. So let's just hang out. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. And there are people that are like, I have kids, but I won't date somebody that has kids. And it's like, well, it's fine. Like, that can be your stance, but
sure,
it's just a little strange, and I think you're going to run into some problems.
Yeah.
Whether it's a red or yellow flag, I'm going to go yellow. I think he could potentially change his mind as they become closer. Like, they've only been dating a month. He just may not have very strong feelings for her in the moment yet. So it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around, like, making sacrifices like that,
right?
You know? So I think she probably needs some more data about him. Here's a funny story. When I met my wife, and I'm not even sure if we were dating yet, or maybe we just started. I mean, it was like, I'm talking early on, like weekend max. I mentioned that I don't know how this even came up, because she's brought this up to me before. At the time, she smoked cigarettes, but not a lot. Like, she would just have a couple if we'd go out. Yeah. But she wasn't the kind of person that would like step out and smoke all day. And somehow she got it out of me that I said that I would never want to marry a smoker. It sounds like I was like being like critical of her, but I don't think that's how it came out.
Yeah.
I think I was just like being honest and like, yeah, I think I wouldn't really like being married to a smoker. And it's a little hypocritical because I used to be a smoker, but it was just, one of the reasons is that I used to be a smoker. So I was like, I don't really want to be around smoking. So,
right.
And it wasn't necessarily like an attack on smokers. It was more of like, I don't want to start smoking again. So being married to a smoker would be really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that she quit, and she said that it helped her quit because she was like, I really like this guy, and I don't really want to be a smoker. So here's a good time to do it. And so she did quit. So that's kind of funny. But this so early in our dating that, I mean, I eventually fell madly in love with this person. If she was still a smoker, I don't think I would have, like, that wouldn't have been the thing that stopped me, you know? I would have just learned to accept it.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that's what's the scenario here. And maybe she's pressing the issue too hard, too early.
Yeah, maybe. It's interesting because I feel like so often we talk about communication being like the great redeemer, but in this moment, his firm communication of like a potential deal breaker is really difficult.
Right. And we mentioned this in a previous podcast that when I met my wife, I told her I was not going to have any more kids and I was never going to be married again.
Yeah.
I did both. So sometimes, your plans and whatever change. And sometimes you meet somebody that is really special and, you can kind of change those little details that you think are so important, and they can become less important. So
yeah.
But overall, I do want to say the guy sounds very selfish. So I'm not. I feel like I'm being critical of her, because I always want to like sort of examine both sides. But I just want to be clear. He kind of sounds like a bit of a dick.
Yeah, I'd walk away. Run away.
All right, so this next one comes from r/relationships, comes from a 31-year-old female, and she states that her new boyfriend, who is a 31-year-old male, keeps saying, "What does it do?" during foreplay, and I've only just realized what he wanted me to say. How to progress. I've been dating a guy for 3 months now, and he's really nice and funny, super kind, etc. He's good at actual sex, but he seemed a bit of a novice when it comes to foreplay, and I have to direct him a bit, but that's fine. However, he kept doing this thing where he would be doing something, like kissing my neck, and I'd let on that it felt good, but he would keep saying, "What does this do? What does it do?" At first, I wasn't sure I was hearing him correctly, or that was his way of indicating he was figuring out my body. For example, a weird way of saying, "Does her neck respond to this?" But then one night, he just kept repeating it, and in the end, I asked, "What do you mean?" He replied, "What does this do?" and wiggled his tongue on my neck. I asked, "What? Your tongue?" He said, "What does it do?" I was really confused and said, "Huh?" He dropped it, but then did it again when he was doing something else. "What does this do?" etc. I asked why he kept saying it, and he seemed hurt and said, "It doesn't matter." I've just realized he probably wanted me to say, "It turns me on," and now I feel kind of bad for not realizing. But I've never had a guy keep asking me what something does during sex so constantly. It feels a bit awkward to have to say that. And what if I'm wrong and that's not what he meant? I'm thinking of telling him I've just realized and apologizing, but at the same time, I kind of think it would be a bit of a buzzkill now. Is this a normal thing that guys do during sex sometimes?
No. Okay, so this is so bizarre to me, but it's mostly about the phrasing, right? I couldn't help but think, did he hear someone say what does that mouth do? Or something that makes some sense, and then sexy talk as a second language type of situation,
I think he's just really bad at dirty talk. That's my take. And I think he's trying to get her to say something dirty.
Okay.
I think he wants her to say "It makes me so wet," or "It gets me so hot," or "I can't." I think he has a thing in his mind that he wants her to say back.
Right.
But he's giving a really terrible cue.
Horrible.
He should be more direct.
Yes.
If he wants her to talk dirty, he could say how wet are you right now or something. You know what I mean? Something that's
something that actually prompts you to respond in the way that he's looking for, because this shit, I'd be bone dry in a minute. What are you saying to me?
I think lots of people are scared to talk about sex, and that's a major hindrance on their quality of sex. And it's one of those things that can be easily avoided with a clear conversation outside the bedroom, I believe. I think this is something that they could talk about, dirty talk, and how they feel about it and what kind of dirty talk they like and stuff like that, instead of trying to figure it out in the moment, And I know some people will be like, "Oh, well, that's not fun. You don't want to you want some surprises and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, well, let's be real. Sex is something that usually when two people start doing it together, they're going to get better at knowing each other, knowing what they like. And it tends to get better as you do it more and more, right?
Yeah. And if you don't ask for what you need, in many cases, your partner's not just going to get there magically, right? Your partner's not going to go out and be like, "Oh yeah, I should be naked, but with one sock on." That's the thing that they need. You need to be clear.
And everybody's so different, okay?
Yeah.
If you're, let's say something like oral sex, everyone is pretty different, if you're with a new partner, they might not like what your old partner liked. They may actually hate what your old partner liked, and they may love something that your old partner hated. It's our bodies are so complex and different that if you don't talk about these things, you can't just when people are try to be "Yeah, I'm good at sex" or whatever, but it's you know what? You're only good at sex if you communicate well with your partner and that you provide them with what they like.
Yeah.
And you can't really read their mind most of the time.
Yeah, getting what you like doesn't mean you're good at sex.
100%. She should approach this situation outside of the bedroom and maybe in a roundabout way. Maybe let's not go back to the what does this do thing. Like,
Right.
let's just maybe like not mention that.
Yeah.
But instead, let's have a sexual talk outside the bedroom and find out more about what he likes and go to dirty talk. Say, what kind of dirty talk do you enjoy?
Right.
What would you like to hear from me? What, she could even tell him what she would like, because I feel like that at least it sort of opens up the back and forth. I think that when someone becomes vulnerable with you, then you're more likely to turn around and feel okay doing the same.
Yeah. And you also model what that looks like for them, which is super helpful for people.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, it doesn't sound like this guy sounds really kind of inexperienced in some ways, but
yeah,
and definitely in the communication area. So yeah, I think that's probably her best approach.
Greg, can I ask you one question about this one?
Yeah.
So she says that he's good at actual sex.
Oh, yeah.
But he seems a bit of a novice when it comes to foreplay. I think that's really common for heterosexual men. What are your thoughts on that piece of this?
Well, first of all, I don't like the way she's framing it. It's very heteronormative to call intercourse actual sex.
Right, absolutely.
Well, it's like, so then what? What do lesbians do? Do they not have actual sex? So first of all, I would
problematic.
I would be critical with the way she frames that. I like the whole idea of let's reframe sex as being the entire thing. And it doesn't have to have intercourse involved, doesn't have to end in intercourse, So with that out of the way.
Or ejaculation, it seems.
Yeah, true.
Not needed.
No, especially the nofap guys don't want that.
Right.
Yeah, so a bit of a novice when it comes to foreplay. Yeah, I think in general, there's a lot of guys who maybe try to rush it into intercourse, or as she says, actual sex. And I don't really know why that is. I guess because maybe it's the most pleasurable part for most men, because if anything, it's the most stimulating part physically.
Yeah.
But I'd say these dudes are missing out, because I think foreplay is like, that's the part where you really create the good sex. You know what I mean? An orgasm is always going to be an orgasm, but like, how did you get there? What led up to it? I think that's probably the most important part.
Yeah, and especially for folks right now. I mean, we're talking about this whole no-fap thing. Since pornography is such a major part of how people learn about sex, there's not a ton of foreplay in those models.
And let's talk about some unhealthy things that I think pornography puts into people's minds. And that is that within like 2 minutes of the like dick coming out, that's like intercourse starts. And then it's like 20 minutes of pounding, right?
Yeah.
That's just not the reality for most people. Most women don't want that. I mean, I'm not going to say all. I mean, there's definitely some women that are want that. But if you want to talk about the most common desire there, I would say most women, I think I've even read studies where they interviewed people, and like most women don't want intercourse. They don't want intercourse to last more than like 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
They don't want it to
sex could last for an hour or more.
Exactly. Yeah. And the reason, obviously we know that there's a lot of women who don't orgasm through intercourse.
Through heterosexual intercourse, especially.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's kind of like for the man's finishing, ejaculating, whatever.
Right.
But even the ones that can climax during intercourse, they're going to be more likely to do so with a lot of stimulation prior to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, everybody needs to jump on the foreplay train for sure.
Yeah. All right, so this is our disaster of the week. This is from Am I the Asshole? Am I the asshole for not obeying my friend's husband when he wanted me to leave their house? I, 26-year-old female, visited, albeit unannounced, my best friend, 24-year-old female, and her husband, 37-year-old male, a few nights ago at around 10 p.m. I'm aware of their habits and knew they wouldn't be asleep for a good 2 to 3 hours. I wanted to discuss something important with my friend. The husband was very unwelcoming towards me and wanted me to leave immediately, as they were getting ready for bed. My friend excused her husband's behavior and offered me tea and snacks. The husband pulled her away to discuss the issue. I wasn't able to hear what he told her, but he did raise his voice numerous times. They came back to me, my friend crying and the husband shouting that I'm not welcome and he won't be able to sleep if I stay. Mind you, they have a 3-story house and master bedroom is on the 3rd floor. I told him there is no way he is going to hear us talk from that distance, and it's none of his business anyway. He went up fuming and told his wife they'll discuss this in the morning, but she should get ready for sleeping in the guest's bedroom, as he'll lock the master bedroom door. My friend assured me that it's going to be all right and I shouldn't be bothered with the husband. Am I the asshole for staying, though? I can't help but wonder if I caused trouble for my friend. Edit. A few things I would like to address. Number 1, I wanted to announce my pregnancy to my friend that I got confirmed by the OBGYN that day. I was on a road trip circling between friends and family, and she was my last stop. That's why it was so late. Number 2, before getting married and moving in with her husband, she would do the same, for example, come to my house unannounced at random times, and this happened at least 3 or 4 times. Number 3, regarding her being in an abusive relationship, they've been together for like 5 years at least. So yeah, she was young when they met. He likes to keep her to himself, as he often puts it, and decides whether she can meet friends or if it's their alone time. And she shouldn't go out because she was with friends already however many times that week or month. And 4, it's true that I might have cock-blocked him or them, but my friend was in jeans and with full makeup, so it was nowhere near bedtime for her. Plus, it's not like they can't have sex literally any other time.
Okay, so I want to separate her edit. It says that, that she might be in an abusive relationship. Sounds like maybe husband's controlling. I guess, that's sort of relevant here, but I also just want to look at this scenario by itself because I feel like she's just maybe trying to, I don't know, skew the perception into her favor. You know what I'm saying? Because I will say that what happened on that night does not sound controlling to me. It sounds like, I think why did she have to go there at 10 p.m. unannounced? Like, to tell about why can't she see her tomorrow or something? Like, it's a little weird to show up to your married friend's house at 10 p.m. unannounced. What do you think, Deb?
Yeah, so when I was reading this, I'm so old. I know when I got to, I was like, around 10 p.m. I was like, holy shit. I did appreciate that she was like, I kind of know their habits, so I knew they'd be awake. So it shows that she did consider the time. But I do agree with you that part feels uncomfortable to me unless that was like their practice every week, right? Like, I always swing by at 10 p.m. Like, this seems like an outlier, and I would not, I don't, there's not many people that I wouldn't be feeling a certain way about them showing up at my house unannounced at 10 p.m. At least a text before.
Yeah, like, what was prohibiting her from just saying, hey, I've got something that I want to talk to you about that's kind of important. Yeah. Is it okay if I stop by? There's not a single explanation as to why that couldn't have happened.
No, she was going around telling people, can you just send a text? Because you don't know. Maybe they went to bed early that night. Like, it feels a little thoughtless to me.
Yes, she's coming across as really entitled to me.
Yeah.
Like, this is a common thing that I see with people who have entitlement issues, is that everything they do, they've got some big, long explanation about why it should be okay.
Yeah.
Well, she used to do this when she wasn't married and blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, you're naming a bunch of things that aren't the exact same scenario that you're in.
Yeah.
So unless you can tell me that you've done this before and this is common and everyone's usually cool with it, then yeah, I would say you're kind of a dummy for not at least texting. And, maybe his reaction was a little harsh. But I understand why he's pissed. I mean, he doesn't have to be pissed. He could just be annoyed and keep it to himself. But like, yeah, I don't know that. If this happened to me, I don't think I would handle it the way he did, but I definitely wouldn't be happy.
Yeah. So, and that's the piece that I was going to say. There's a difference between not being happy about something and being furious, right? And doing it in front of other people outside your relationship. So in her edit, she mentions this idea of her friend being in an abusive relationship. And so that's troubling, right? Is his behavior, in your opinion, something that feels over the top and unwarranted and damaging? Or, I don't know, that's the piece I'm having a hard time with, because for him to say, like, fuck you, I'm going to bed and you can't sleep in our bed, like, that does feel abusive to me. It's one thing to be, I mean, I could see myself in this similar scenario, and yeah, my partner might be like, I'm going to bed, but we're probably going to just talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more appropriate thing to do if you're upset like he was and you didn't want to sleep in the same room is to say, I'm going to go sleep in the guest room because I just need some space.
Yeah, I need to cool off. Because also, like, the raised voices and shouting, I don't know. I feel like this person is a 37-year-old male. And the only reason I bring up age, I mean, I never want to, like, fully pigeonhole folks in a certain age group. But I will say, for me, in my experience at least, heated arguments, raised voices, shouting, I feel like once I got out of my 20s, that shit was not okay anymore.
No, I agree. I think that, learning to control your emotions, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be upset, but, there's definitely a line when you start slamming things and yelling, and I think it's one of those things where it's like, if it's a very, very, very rare thing, just like but if it's common or even sort of common or whatever, like that's a huge issue. And I think it can make people feel very uncomfortable. It can, and when you're let's say you're a man in a relationship with a woman, oftentimes it can be kind of scary too. If there's like this person that's bigger than you, it's stronger than you, and you're seeing that they can't control their anger to the point where they're slamming things and yelling. Yeah, I think that's, that can be pretty frightening as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of, I mean, I do agree with you that she is trying to explain away a behavior that wasn't really totally appropriate. I get being excited to share something big with a friend and wanting to do it in person so you see their reaction and everything. She mentions these, like, quote unquote, he likes to keep her to himself or have their alone time. Now, alone time's fine. People can have as little or as much alone time as they want and designate it as such. The keep her to himself piece is a little creepy to me, if that's accurate.
Yeah, but I also worry about the credibility of this person's perspective.
Totally.
Because I've known people like this who were friends with maybe a significant other of mine that totally mischaracterize things in our relationship. Things that, my partner didn't feel, I didn't feel, but someone from an outside perspective can sometimes ascribe things like this when it's not appropriate or a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you don't have all of the context. You're not in the relationship.
If this woman who is married was saying these things, then I would be like, yes, that sounds like you're in an abusive, controlling relationship, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't necessarily 100% trust the narrator here.
Yeah, so. I'd agree. What do you think about the wife as a friend in this moment, and her, like, the way that this person, who maybe we don't think is 100% credible, describes it? Like, I'm seeing this friend as kind of like a calming presence who's like, it's fine. Maybe she deals with his temper regularly. She's like, it's fine. Like, it'll be fine. Just what's going on?
She's not really reacting like somebody who's being abused, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's not. Everybody has their own sort of reactions. So, but on first glance, it seems like she's not, because it's just not acting scared, like, oh, you need to get out of here, or like, blah, blah, blah. She's just like,
Well, she was crying.
okay, yeah.
But she doesn't, but she seems to play the good friend card in terms of like, it's fine. Like, he's going to go to bed. I'm crying because I'm upset that we had this fight. But how can I help you?
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing he did for sure is to lock her out of the bedroom. Yeah, I think that's crappy.
Well, also, I don't know. This is hard. And I think I'm curious your take on it too, is the expectations of your partner and how they treat your friends, right? So there's a one point when she first got there, said, the husband was very unwelcoming towards me and wanted me to leave immediately as they were getting ready for bed. And it's quote unquote getting ready for bed. So he said clearly to her, it was clear that she was unwelcome.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if he's going to communicate that to her, she should probably respect that and leave. Whether or not it's a bad scenario for, her friend, and, maybe she does circle back to it, talk to her friend and say, hey, what's going on there? Like, is everything okay? Like, how is he treating you?
Yeah.
There's cause to be concerned, but why just stay and make the situation worse? I think it's a bad decision.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And the friend excused his behavior and offered her tea and snacks. So, I mean, I feel like this friend was happy to see her, but I would say if I were the person, well, I would not do this. I would never really show up unannounced anywhere unless it was like a surprise party or something like that. I just think it's good practice to be like, hey, I would like to swing by in a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm going to go with, yes, she's the asshole. And I'm going to go with, husband's probably the asshole too. But she's definitely an asshole for what she did. So so I'm not going to excuse the husband's behavior. Maybe there is a problem there, but she's clearly an asshole based on what she did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. In the age of cell phones, just send a text. It's so easy.
And here's another thing, and this is speculation, but the wife may also be annoyed with said friend in certain ways too. Like, the husband here could also be channeling a little bit of things that they've talked about. Like, the wife could be like, yeah, this friend is constantly kind of overstepping boundaries and is kind of selfish and not very thoughtful. And that could make the husband trigger his defense mechanism. Like, why are you taking advantage of my wife or something like that?
Yeah. It's true.
There could be a lot here going on that we can't necessarily get from just reading her perspective. This is one of those scenarios where we would love to talk to all three people involved. And I feel like the story could change drastically if that was to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So last week I became very desperate asking for your emails. We've been doing this for 6 weeks now. And, I was really needing that extra validation that there's ears on the other side of this somewhere. So I think I made some pleas for some even just dick pics or, Nigerian scammers. And so we got our first 3 emails.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So the first email is from an actual Nigerian queen. I mean, she's a Nigerian queen to me because she works with me. But she sent us our first email. So thank you for that. And just know that she asked for a specific topic around, how to maintain friendships with exes and when that's appropriate. And so we will absolutely look for some content so we can dig into that a little bit deeper. I know that the question came from kind of listening to our recent guest episode with Dave, but I'm excited to talk more about that and figuring out how to answer your question.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sending that in. Definitely enjoyed reading that. And, she did complain about in her PS that we took too long to get the episode out or something like that. But she says it was 2 weeks for that episode. I said, I think that episode was 2 days late. So cut us a little bit of slack, all right? But thank you.
We were just tweaking things, and now I think we're in a good clip.
But I'm glad that, I'm glad it bothered you. I guess that's a weird thing to say. I'm glad it bothered you because it means that you like listening. So that's a compliment. Thank you.
So nice.
But we will try to keep them. I think Wednesdays is going to be the release day from now on. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Our second email was really short and sweet, but answered Greg's call for a dick pic. It wasn't actually a dick pic, but that's what the title of the email was. So thank you, Christiana, for sending that our way.
Yeah, there's a cartoon and there's nudity, so we'll slide that into the dick pic file.
And we'll share it on Instagram. So why not? And
last but not least, we got our first email from a person who we do not know. So we got stranger. There's no stranger danger. This is stranger safe. Stranger. Yes, I don't know. I liked her. The title was "This Is Not a Dick Pic." So thank you for giving us some meat to your email and not that kind of meat. Do we want to read it or how? I mean,
yeah. I say so. So this email's from Jacqueline, and
hi, Jacqueline.
Hi. So titled "This Is Not a Dick Pic," and so she says she really loves the podcast. She found it on Reddit, which makes it a little extra fun for us too. She says that she's terminally online, works from home, and thinks it'd be fun if we could try to include at least one of our very worst takes under someone's post. That would really highlight how crazy people are on there. Just like one awful reply per episode. Yeah, what do you think of that idea?
No, that's a good idea. So there are always terrible comments, and some of them are even like highly upvoted. So it would, I think that's a good idea. I would definitely like to do that. So
yeah,
thanks
cool.
For that
so we'll try to bring that in. So also we have a question. So since we begged for it, and Greg, you absolutely did. So COVID basically killed my relationship's date night groove. The relationship is great, but we've become couch potatoes who'd rather stay in and order something than go out. When I try to suggest going out, I'm met with such a lack of enthusiasm that I drop it. It's not a big deal at all, but we used to get dinner or go to a movie. And at 29, I'd like to leave the house a bit more since mask mandates are gone. Do you have any clever advice on how to lure my dude out into the world again?
Okay, well, first of all, I think it is important to do these kinds of things. You know, I think we've talked about this before, about patterns and how sometimes in order to establish a pattern, you just have to dive in and do it. You know, you can't really wait for the thing to grab you. Like you sort of have to say, this is important and this is what we're going to do. And then just stick to it. Right. So, but how to lure him out into the world again? I don't know your dude specifically. But I'm assuming he has interests of his own, and perhaps a good way to do that would be to find something that you know is in his wheelhouse. You know, perhaps he likes a certain band, perhaps there's a certain type of food that he really likes, or it could be a play, could be anything. Like just if you say, hey, let's go to the blah, blah, blah. And that's, you know, if that's something that he really likes, that's going to make it easier for him to probably jump out and do something. What do you think?
Yeah. And I will share too that, Jacqueline, I am in the exact same boat as you right now. My partner, who is also a dude, has gone from just like a homebody to like, is this agoraphobia, you know, post-COVID? And I actually asked him, I was like, what do you think about this question? And he had a couple good thoughts. One is something that I've already done that does work. And it is like similar to what Greg said. There's a restaurant that I could care less if we ever went there again. I don't love it, but he really likes this place. We've gone there almost exclusively. It's like the only restaurant we've gone to. So that's fine. But the other piece is really figuring out what is uncomfortable for him about going outside at this point. So we talked about how he feels comfortable like walking around indoors in like big box stores or like some large space. So, I mean, yes, we've been on a Costco date, folks. Costco pizza and a long romantic Costco walk. If it's all you got right now, it's fine. But trying to figure out what works with the weather getting nicer, hopefully where you are, you know, going to a park or having a picnic or doing something outside. If some of this isn't only related to being kind of lazy and happy to be on the couch, but also like a continual fear of being outside during what is still a global pandemic, folks. So I think you can do this, but it will take a little bit of extra thought. And
Yeah, I think that's super solid advice.
baby steps. Maybe these are shorter dates than you're used to, but you can get started.
Yeah, you can make a date out of anything. I think that, so I can give a personal anecdote for me and my wife. After, this last, because we were really kind of back into the dating swing prior to the Omicron COVID variant. And we had gone out on some dates. We had, stayed at a hotel, like sort of staycation style, things like that. Gone out and had drinks. We'd kind of gotten back into the swing of things. And then with Omicron, we kind of shut it all down again. And I've noticed that it's been slow. We haven't really done anything. And I noticed it was causing my wife a little bit of anxiety when I talked about maybe going to dinner or going to get drinks or something like that. And so then I came up with this idea. I'm like, look, date night doesn't have to be we go out somewhere and like get dinner or drinks. Like we could just have somebody, watch our son, and we could sit on the back porch and talk and have cocktails, or we could, go somewhere not sort of typical datey kind of, like we could go to a park and walk around at night, basically just, we could do anything that we normally can't do with our 5-year-old, and just enjoy each other's company. And it doesn't have to be this like date, like dinner movie, it can just be, like you said, walk around Costco together. That's like when you have a kid, at least for our scenario, just doing that can just be nice, just to sort of step out and do something different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you do on some of your first dates.
Yeah. So let us know, Jacqueline. We need an update. We need to know how you got this dude out of the house again and what you guys did. And again, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. I'm happy that you saw us on Reddit. I know that we'll eventually probably be trying to advertise on Reddit and maybe bring in some more of the Redditors. But yeah, thanks for the email.
So as always, you can follow us on Instagram at Red Flags Podcast, and that's red with 2 Ds.
And you can send us more emails. We're definitely not done. That wasn't it. We're not just like, we're not happy yet. I mean, we're happier, but we need more. So the email is theredflagspodcast@gmail.com. That's with 2 Ds. You can send us a question, or, I'm going to keep saying that you could take a voice memo on your phone of your question so we can play your beautiful voice on the air. I know that terrifies some people, but yeah, do whatever you want, but just send it to us.
Have a good week.